Welcome to Casual Watch Talk, the podcast from the Casual Watch Reviewer YouTube channel. Join us as we talk everything watches, from watch collecting, the latest horology news and interviews. If you're not already subscribed, subscribe on your favourite podcast app. Let's dive into the show. Hi everyone, welcome back to Casual Watch Talk for, unbelievably, episode 20. If you've been listening...
2-0.
2-0. If you've been listening from the start, thank you very much. Pat on the back. I think that's 20 in total, but 16, I think, with you, Chris, so far.
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. And how many in stay at home? So it's like, it feels like we've been doing this for 18 years now.
That's true, yeah. And I will say, you've had the longest run. You're definitely in the top 4 co-presenters that I've had on the show.
Okay, all right, good. You keep me around.
I'll keep you around.
Sounds good.
Well, of course, I have to offer it to you first. What watch have you been wearing this week?
So I did a midweek switch. I'm over on my Seiko Turtle, my modified Seiko Turtle with my GMT 12-hour bezel. And one of the reasons why I popped it on is over in our Facebook group, folks are talking about, and you brought this up, you've got the Barton bands. I've got the silicone Barton band strap with the awesome keeper on it that I think you're going to do a review on or mention on your channel. And I was like, oh, I haven't worn that in a while. That's nice and comfy. And and been playing with the Ultimate Turtle over here. So it's Seiko Turtle week. Playing with the Ultimate Turtle, getting that dialed in. Sent you got it down, and it's on one of my watch winders right now. So it's hanging out, and we'll see if it settles down. And
yeah, if anybody's not familiar with that story about the Ultimate Turtle, I had a turtle watch that Chris has kindly been working on for probably about 6 months now. If you're interested in finding out more, there is a YouTube video, but I think we're calling it the Ultimate Turtle because we think it might be the best. Now that Chris has regulated it and spent so much time on it, it might be the best version of that turtle that there's ever been, allegedly.
Allegedly, yeah. No, it's got it dialed in. Not too many watch obsessions. I've discovered a fun Seiko that I never knew existed. Oh, right. And so if you're playing at home, the SNJ023 showed up on watches on Reddit, and I'll send Sam the link. And it is a sort of a retro 90s Annie-Digi, but it immediately strikes me. It looks like the Omega X33 with its inverse LCD and white hands. Pretty cool looking, sort of retro 90s looking watch that I just stumbled upon. And apparently, of course, special edition. Well, not special edition, limited edition. I don't even know if they sold them here. I haven't gone completely down that rabbit hole, but that was definitely a nice tangent obsession for me this week. Checking that out. Pretty cool Annie-Digi watch that looks like the X33.
Yeah, we'll put a picture on the Facebook group, and if you've not joined the Facebook group yet, I'm so impressed at how much it's grown over, what would you say, Chris, the last 2 or 3 weeks?
Yeah. New members all the time. Always approved a bunch of people, and it's a private group, but it's good bunch of people, and have lots of interesting discussions so far. So what I've been wearing is, again, I've been wearing my little titanium Citizen watch. This is my Japan-only land version of the Citizen. I just love this thing. I took it off and I've put it on a leather NATO strap just for the last couple of days. But you're right in what you said before. I have had it on, well, first of all, had it on a NATO strap, a toxic NATO strap, which I loved, but I was wearing it to death. So I ordered some Barton silicone straps. Now, I've never really been drawn to Barton because they were the kind of ones on Amazon that were, around the $14 mark, and I was like, oh, are these any good? But I got 2 of the Elite silicone ones, and I'd sort of said to myself that I wouldn't review any more watch straps. I just don't know. I just dedicated watch strap videos because I don't know how exciting they are for
of viewers to watch, but these ones I really think I will. They're $20 silicone watch straps, and like you said, the attention into the actual functionality of the strap, I've never seen anything like it, really. That special notch they have for the keeper, you pointed out, extremely comfortable. I've got a nice olive green one, and I'll go over this in the review. I've got the orange one, and I don't think the orange one quite works, but we'll go over that when I do a review. And then my watch obsession it's been that flipping Christoper Wared again, that world timer, the yellow. And I also added like a Yemmer to we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, weren't we? Adding something to your shopping cart and then putting the discount. And I was like, oh, should I do it? Should I not? And I've kind of left it there. I don't know whether I'm making rational decisions about buying watches at the moment because I'm stuck at home.
No, yeah, absolutely no. Yeah, no. My my parents got me a $100 gift card to Amazon for my birthday, and that was burning a hole in my pocket, literally. And I was like, well, it's not enough to buy a watch, but maybe something else. And just immediately, what can I get? Dangerous.
Oh no,
these are dangerous e-commerce times at home.
Okay, guys, what we're going to do today is our usual format is we do a few news stories and then we have longer form discussion for the second part after the break. But this week, I think we're going to knock out more news stories than most, and then Chris has got a rant, and then I'm going to finish with a bit of a rant. So if you want to see us both get heated about two completely different subjects, then this is the episode for you. First news story up, and this one I haven't discussed with you, Chris, because I wanted to get your opinion on it. So I went down a bit of a rabbit hole. I was on Watch Pro, and in fact, a lot of these stories I'm going to talk through today are on Watch Pro. And they were talking about a fashion brand. I'd never heard of it. Now, I didn't realise this, but Timex have a luxury division where they make branded, I mean, it makes sense, but they make branded watches. So I checked out the brands, and you've got like Versace on there, a few others that I can't pronounce, but well-known fashion brands.
So fashion brands that contract with Timex Group to make their watches.
Yeah. So then so I'm on the site, just, blah, 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 nothing really of great interest. And then I saw this one called Tesla or Tesla, Teslar. And I was like, oh, that's spelt differently than Tesla. So they're not making like Tesla branded watches, the car company. So then I click on this, and I don't know if I've never heard of a watch that does this. It's a quartz watch, but it's got a chip in it that they've designed this watch to resist the harmful effects of electromagnetic frequency radiation. So essentially what it does, it emits a frequency that is similar to the natural signal that the Earth gives off. So what this does is it counteracts any electromagnetic fields. You wear it on the wrist and then it resonates with your body's own frequency or the Earth's natural frequency. It sounds weird. Like, why would Timex make this watch?
All right. So first of all, let me just state, yeah, the EMF radiation thing. Oh, kids, get your crystals out and your tinfoil hats out, because it's not you're gonna be fine. Everybody's gonna be fine. I always find it interesting. So I'm a ham radio operator, amateur radio operator, and I will have people ask me. They'll be like, hey, well, we heard cell phones maybe were dangerous. Da, 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 da. Okay, very easy. Cell phones put out about 1/3 of a watt of energy. And yeah, you're holding them right to your head, but it's not ionizing radiation, so you're totally safe. Ham radio operators have been using 40-watt amplifiers and beaming it on giant antennas directly through them for the last 70 years, and we haven't heard any issues with that. So I think we'll be okay. So that's my first part there. The second part is, however you want to market it. I guess if it doesn't directly fall back on Timex, does Timex have any specific branding on the watch? It's just this Tesla brand. This
Tesla brand, yeah.
And it was only through a Google search that you figured out that they happened to also make that. Were they proud of it?
I just went on this Timex luxury division. Anybody can go on it, because I was looking for who makes the Versace watches or whatever.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, it's quite interesting. It seemed a bit out of character, as they were all fashion brands, and then there's just this random
sudden this
will help you with stress, a watch that reduces stress. I'm like, oh, well, fair enough. So I just thought that would give you a little bit of a chuckle.
Yes, if you you can't see this, it's a podcast, but definitely hands facepalm full on for that one.
Next story. Have you seen this? I think Christoper Wared are doing some great stuff. I'm just going to give them credit where credit's due. I really like that world timer that I mentioned, but they've created a watch. Now, my opinion's kind of divided on this, but it has a blue sapphire dial.
The dial, is it, and it's so semi-translucent?
Yes, it's translucent, and you can see the Solita movement through it that they're using for that particular model.
Did you say that sarcastically?
Well, it's not a skeleton. Yeah, it's interesting because it's not a skeletonized movement.
Okay, all right. So, but okay, it's all right. It's different. It's kind of sharp looking. I like the color choice.
I'm not like a massive fan of it. I'm sure it'll look pretty cool in person, but
and they did it on the back as well. Exhibition case it's got that same color blue sapphire. So it's the C60 with that dial. Any exorbitant price markup or something reasonable?
Yeah, and it's actually quite reasonable for a watch like that. It's $795 on a standard bracelet or $895 on a steel bracelet, which I don't think that is. I mean, it's a fairly good-looking watch for that price. I think Christoper Wared's pricing's not bad, actually.
It's cool.
Continuing with watch companies trying different things, this is the first time I think they've done something quite as wacky as... Well, maybe this isn't wacky, but have you seen the new Doxa 300T that has a forged carbon case?
Let me pull it up.
Again, a collaboration they've done with Aqualung, which I believe was Jacques Cousteau's diving brand at one time, but I'm sure listeners will correct me on that. It's a nice looking watch. Forged carbon, if anybody's not familiar, is essentially, it's like carbon fiber, except they just take the fibers, compress it and mold it, so it doesn't have that same, would you call them striations, Chris, of carbon fiber, or the same pattern?
Yeah, or the fiber pattern. Yeah, it's not like a piece of carbon woven fiber. It's a bunch of fibers that are kind of, it definitely looks like it's been pressed, compressed, to form the shape of it.
It looks probably like rock, doesn't it? Like a fossilized rock.
Yeah, it's got a sort of a natural texture, but that black carbon.
Yeah, and the dial is also forged carbon as well. So I'm imagining that it's extremely light. Now, it's quite expensive, $4,790, which, to put that in comparison to a normal version of this watch in a steel case, $1,850 or something, I don't know whether I'll... Well, first of all, I'm not a great fan of... But what do you think of this one, Chris?
Yeah, I'm a super fan of it. I mean, I think it's interesting. This is something that watch companies, Doxa, the tool watches out there, the tool watch companies out there, they will, instead of experimenting with different designs, they will often experiment with different materials. So you'll see all the German brands, you'll see the marine steel, you'll see tegamented, you'll see hardening, you'll see shot peened, you'll see, these different physical property materials that they'll try to affect the case or the watch or make it stronger, or the seals, and the technical aspects of the tool watch. So it's something that interesting for them to try it. Early forged carbon watches, like these cases, it's like hit or miss, and just like in the early days of making carbon fiber parts for cars, if the weave isn't directly right, if the epoxy doesn't set up correctly at the right temperature, at the right pressure, in the autoclave, because I'm sure these are made in that same sort of way where they're in under pressure, or under vacuum and then pressurized, these sorts of physical properties that they're going for. It's hard, and I'm sure a lot of them get thrown away and they don't come out right. So in that aspect, I respect that they're trying new materials. For the price, not for me.
Next story up here is there's been quite a lot of new watches, or at least quirky watches, that worth a mention. Next up, have you seen the new G-Shock NASA limited edition version? Now, for listeners that aren't aware, G-Shocks were actually, or still are, I imagine, used in space. And in fact, you can see a lot of images of this DW 5600 on astronauts' arms. Like they'll have their Omega on one arm and then a G-Shock on the other. But they've made, it's completely white, DW 6900. It has the NASA logo on it, and then it has the full name, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, written on the band. I like the idea of it. I don't know whether I would add one to the collection.
It really depends if you're a fan of the worm logo. So if you like the NASA worm logo, they have been brandishing that on everything. So as a company, you can ask to license that. I think it's a license deal. It might be public domain, but if you're into that sort of NASA worm logo design look, that super white G-Shock, very cool. And it's interesting you mentioned, Sam, that often missed is that the DW 5600, like that's a space certified watch. But like if you look on Casio's website, it's like a second, like I don't even think they mention it. Yeah, it's like only NASA that's like, oh yeah, and you can take a Casio. Those watches have been to space probably more or as many times as any of the other mechanical watches.
A few years ago now, I reviewed one of those Timex data links, which was a watch that was co-developed with Microsoft that Timex made. That was one of the I think that there's only a handful of watches that NASA ever certified. Obviously, the Omega G-Shock and this Timex, and I forget the other one. We'll have to look it up. I wonder whether it's the Fortis. I know that they also tested it.
That's Roscosmos and the European Space Agency, ESA. So I don't think NASA's even touched that. I think that's Fortis is just through ESA and Russia.
I'll probably get my stories confused, but before we've got a few more interesting watch subjects, but before we do that, let's just pause for a very quick break. Welcome back, everyone, and we're continuing with what's been a really interesting news week in watches, but I'll just say one thing. Both Chris and I spoke about this earlier in the week. We were wondering whether to do the watches and wonders. I know a lot of other YouTubes have done it, but I don't know about you, Chris, but there was nothing really that excited me. They were all watches that I could never really afford, or the ones that I could afford. I don't know. Nothing really blew me away. What did you think?
It's the Watches and Wonders show in the past. I mean, I don't think it's the premise of it has always been that haute horology, high horology, the art form of watches. So you've got a lot of the tourbillons, you got, those just untouchable pieces for most of us regulars, and more on the art side, that Watches and Wonders. I always felt like it was almost an art show more than a watch show, where Baselworld would be, for the majority.
I'll have to word this correctly, but definitely on a few of the watch forums that I'm on, Urban Gentry, for example, there was a lot of people putting that new Lange on, saying, this is my new Grail watch. And I was like, I felt like typing back. You're obviously in your mid-20s. Please don't save up $35,000 for a Lange watch. Invest that money. Buy a house with it.
Right.
Buy a parcel of land. Please don't save up for a Lange watch. To buy a Lange watch you have to be very, very rich, where it almost doesn't matter.
It doesn't, right? It has to not matter. Yeah.
You
absolutely.
would be so paranoid about wearing it. $30,000 from something that could easily get stolen. It's incredible, really. But not disparaging Lange, because they obviously are fantastic watches. But so one for you here, Chris. This new Zinn, the U50, which to me, I only briefly looked at it, but it looks like their standard watch that was huge is now they've made it in a more reasonable size. Would you say? Do you think is that the idea, or?
Yeah, it used to be a 45, I think, and then it's down to 40 or 41, something like that. It's a reason they shrunk it down, and I think it looks great. I think it's a super iconic design, to have more size options is great. Two weird quirks on that. One was over on the Zin forums, a lot of folks were like, well, if you want it for the ladies' watch, that macho machismo, like, it comes in a 45 because, obviously it needs to be that size, that kind of thing. So I a little tongue in cheek, but certainly I caught a little bit of that. I don't think so. I think this is, still at 40 to 41 millimeters. That's a plenty big watch for anyone with, 7+ inch wrists. That's going to be totally fine. The other thing that was interesting, they charged more for them. I don't know if you caught that.
No, I didn't. So they're starting around $2,000, $2,200-ish.
I think the price bumped like 200, I think it was, something like that. And it sort of, everybody, it was enough of a bump to make people like actually got, like, if it was the same price, I'd be like, all right, well, in all intents and purposes, it's the same watch. I mean, yes, okay, there's a little bit less steel in it, but like, what's that, a pound? And I could kind of see that, but yeah, they bumped the price up a little bit, which I thought was interesting.
Oh, that's weird. Maybe they're expecting it to be a big seller. Maybe they thought, oh, we've absolutely nailed it now. This is going to be a big seller for us. Similar to, probably the success that Doxa had with their 200, their ST200 watch, which was a more, I won't say wearable because people love Doxas, but for like an everyday wearable watch to the office, right, then that new Doxa is infinitely more wearable, you could argue. The dial immediately reminds me of, is it Modane with the painted blocks, the paintings that are all just squares and stuff like that? The hands are very artistic in the fact that they're so iconic. You look at with the red seconds hand, blocky hour minute hand, you immediately know it's a Zin U1 or the U50. Next story is, have you seen the new... So we've talked about the Seiko reissues. They did the Apocalypse Now Turtle, even though they made no reference to the film. They've also did the limited edition version to celebrate their history. Well, now it seems like they've reissued a reissue of the 62 MAS, but then made it more affordable, but then also in different versions. So there's definitely one that's limited edition, but there's one that's got like a brown dial with gilt hands, a brownish dial with a silver hands, and then one that's more traditional, like with a grey dial and a grey bezel. I really like the look of... I honestly really like the look of them. The pricing, it's they're tickling around that. You can tell now that all the new watches are going to be 1,000, 1,200, and then the limited edition one is 1,350. Well, so they've broken out. What do you think last year for them was like 750, wasn't it? It was like, it was almost 750, and now it's like 1,000. I mean, I like the look of them. What do you think? They look good, but so did they change what? So the first one that came out was the SLA 017. That was limited to 2,000. That was that 3,400, but it had the high end movement in it, the 8L35, which is whatever the Grand Seiko, I think. Yeah, and this was the start, really. That 62 MAS was the start of these really expensive limited editions at Baselworld, because then you had like the 1968, 69 or whatever it was called, and then you had obviously they did the 6105, but now they've made, because they did make an affordable one of that at the time, and I bought it. That was the Paddy version that I had loads of issues with, but that one had different hands. It looks similar to a 62 MAS. That's right. They put the arrow. Yeah. But this one really looks like it. This one looks like an evolution of the 62 MAS. Yeah. It's closer. It's certainly a closer look. So now these two models, the SPB 051, 053, they're larger. So they're 42 mil. So a little bit larger, but less money. No mention of what movement is in them. It's the 6L35 or the 6R35 again that was in the turtles. Those turtles. I see. 6R35. Yeah. In $1,000 watch. I can't do it.
We talked about this. We talked about this before, but I mean, it's the frustrating part for me is they could do better here. They could do so much better, and they're holding on to their quality, super awesome movements for Grand Seiko, and that's how they're using it to elevate their brand and say, okay, well, Grand Seiko has all the great movements. Okay, fine, fantastic, but don't do that and simultaneously take your budget brand, right? If you're going to pin the two, I mean, I understand they've changed hands and they're no longer the same company. Sure. But don't take your budget brand and then just start raising the prices without giving us anything extra. Like, please don't do that.
What do you think about the Apocalypse Now version and this version? Clearly what a Seiko fan would want. I mean, I want it. I'm a Seiko fan and I want these watches. Yeah. But in the past, they've never really, you could argue they've never really cared what the fans wanted in the past. But in recent years, we saw the Arnie, Annie, Digi, Arnie, Predator, and, Commando watch. That was clearly a nod to the fans. The Apocalypse Now version, clearly a nod to the fans. This 62 MAS, clearly a nod to the fans. Do you think they're embracing the fan community, or do you think they're exploiting the fan community?
It feels like exploiting. It feels like it. Because it's on the premise that someone is going to have many of these. Or that someone is going to want to collect these, and not necessarily on the premise of, hey, we used to make this a re-edition on its own that's a decent priced re-edition of something that we made years ago. Okay, that is. But this tease with the special, and we're gonna make one that's got this with sapphire, and
the one that comes on a rubber bracelet is $1,000. Then the one that comes on the steel bracelet is $1,200. Now those Seiko steel bracelets, never in a million years have they spent probably even $50 designing those. I refuse to believe that that's a $200 bracelet. But then they have a limited edition with a different dial at $1,350. So it has got the metal bracelet, but it's $350 more than the rubber bracelet for a limited edition. Now, you had a great analogy about these limited editions, didn't you? Yeah.
I was talking to Sam earlier. So I went on a bit of a rabbit hole. I was looking for a new everyday carry knife. I found a YouTuber, just like I would with watches, just like I would with anything that I'm interested in. I'm gonna watch a review on YouTube and see if it's for me. But this YouTuber, and I'll put a link in the description where we'll talk about it on the Facebook group, specifically called out the fact that he was no longer going to review special edition knives because he was just tired for the community of this situation where you get this knife that comes in a special color, okay? And they have 200 of them. And if you really want that, well, you can't get it because people have already purchased it. Flippers are already bought it. You're going to have to buy it on the secondary market. So the same sort of stories that we hear all the time with watches where, a bunch of people went out and they bought that Timex because they didn't know how many were going to be made. And they tried to flip them on eBay and it was a special edition, or they thought it was a special edition, or these same sort of stories where people will just scoop up the 200 or the not enough. He was tired of it. And I think he had enough subscribers and enough sort of play in the community to say, I'm just not going to review. I'm not going to bring attention to these one-off special editions that no one can buy, that are just a play for money. They're just jacking up the price to get people the fear of missing out. So that terrible marketing plan where it's the fear of missing out and you got to buy now because we're only going to make this in green for, one time. And so he said, if you're a small knife maker and you're going to do a limited run, but depending on how they sell, you may make more, that's fine. That's completely different. But the marketing of the truly, we could make 1 billion of these, but we're only going to make 100. And so you better buy now. No good for anybody. Not good for the consumer, not good for the community. And so totally agree with not doing it.
this is the thing that annoys me, particularly about the when they reissued that 62 MAS watch, because they're for the original 62 MAS ones that, and we're not talking crazy money for them. I mean, I guess a really good example, you might pay $3,000 or $4,000 for it. That watch was probably less than $100. I'm sure it was less than $100 when it came out. I mean, this was a standard Seiko. The romance that watch had, the fact that obviously a lot of people didn't really care about them at the start. They're just like, oh, it's just a Seiko watch. You know, I had it in the military or whatever. That's the romance around those. The reissues shouldn't be oh, well, yeah, you like the romance of that watch that was basically the everyman's watch. Now we're going to make it a very unaffordable price for you. So it's
and take it away from the everyman. You know, and elevate it to a place where like where like normal people can't buy it. And you're like, that literally is outside of the history of the watch and your brand, that you can't go and just pick one of these up. Frustrating. And the blue looks, by the way, inside line, the blue looks so good on this watch. That blue dial, so sharp. But
yeah, it looks awesome.
1300, nope. Sorry, Seiko. No special editions here.
Guys, let us know what you think about that on the Facebook group or whatever you're watching this or listening this on. The podcast is now available on Stitcher. I know some people asked me for that. Chris and I managed to work out a way of getting it onto Stitcher so you can listen there as well, if that's your preferred method. Well, Chris, you just had a rant about knives, and I'm going to have a little bit of a rant here. And this again was... we're getting a lot of great subjects from the Facebook group, so thank you to Lee over on the Facebook group who commented about CWC watches. So if anybody's not familiar, Cabot Watch Company made for quite a long time general service watches for the British military. They stopped, I think, around the mid-2000s, but for a long time they were used. I made an upload on I have one of these G10 general service watches, and I get some great comments on them. A lot of people who served in the military and said, oh, we had drawers full of them, and then some people that served in the military were like, oh no, we could never get hold of them. Anyway, very simple service watch. Now, the reason that I get a little bit, because I would own more, the CWC watch that I have, I will never get rid of it. I gave it to my father-in-law, who he wore it for years and sadly passed away. Very simple quartz watch, 36 millimeters, 18 mil lug width. You put it on a NATO, fixed spring bars, has an acrylic crystal on it. It is what it is. It's a utility watch, and they made a boatload of them. What happened was, for some reason, now if you go on the CWC website, it's now run by Silverman's. Now, Silverman's was, or probably still is, an army surplus store. And at some point, I'm guessing around the mid-2000s, they bought, either licensed the Cabot Watch Company, or they bought what remained of the Cabot Watch Company. I speculate this is around when they lost their military contract, I think, because as far as I'm aware, they're not current military issue, although obviously somebody can correct me on these. There's a lot of people that are very knowledgeable about these watches, far more than I am. So I'm not going to talk about the watches in general. What I am going to talk about is I feel like Silverman's now are ruining the Cabot Watch Company name by just taking the absolute mick with I don't even know if I can swear on here, but they're basically taking the piss with the pricing now. So what I thought I would do to illustrate my point, Chris, and the reason that I feel so bad about this is because, for a start, if you want that British military history, even the second-hand CWC watches have gone up in price. Now, you can only get them through Silverman's. They aren't on the grey market. You can't buy them. They've restricted the supply chain, so only they can sell them. But when I bought my G10 watch, and it was probably early 2000s, maybe 2004 or something like that, you could regularly get them on. You could buy job lots of them on eBay for they were $20 a piece. You'd often find them my mum used to, when I was a kid, we always used to go to antiques fairs. She was collected these Toby jugs, which is basically like a jug, but it's like a man with a handle on the back. The jug is the shape of a person sat down usually. Honestly, they couldn't give these away at antiques fairs. I mean, I picked up a mechanical one, which I've always regretted selling them, but you could regularly get these. They weren't in scarce supply at all.
Right.
There's some factory out there that could knock these out in. And what's proved that is there's another company called MCW, which kind of make, I guess, a homage to this, although I think they might have been military issued at one time as well. But essentially, they make the same watch just with MWC on it. This is what annoys me now, because people who really love military watches, of which I'm certainly one, and I'm sure you are as well, Chris, you're essentially, I suppose, similar to your knife comment. It's like, and similar to the Seiko comment, if you want this watch, you can only buy it from CWC, and you've basically got to pay what I think is outrageous pricing for these watches. So what I thought I'd do, Chris, is I'll play a bit of Price is Right with you here. Now, what I'm sure the people at Silverman's, I'm not going to say, oh, well, in the early 2000s, I could buy it on eBay for £40, because that doesn't mean anything. That you can't equate that to anything. So what I did was I went on the Wayback Machine. If anybody's not familiar, I'm sure you know it well, Chris. This is just an awesome site that archives old websites. So you can look at you could look at Apple in when they released the iMac in 1997. You could go back to that original launch page, and it just so happens that they have archived. Sometimes it's only once a year, the actual original Cabot Watch Company website, and then their distributor Silverman's, so you can actually go back. Now, again, I'm going to be fair here. I am not going to go back to the year 2000, because that's like 20 years ago, which is still unbelievable to me to think that 2000 was 20 years ago.
I know, right? Yeah.
But what I thought I would do is I thought I would give you an idea of pricing in 2012, so 8 years ago.
So this is 8 years ago. Okay.
8 years ago, and then 2016, and whatever the current price is nowadays.
And I was thinking about it when you were saying taking something that was military issued. It reminded me of the Urban Outfitters, where they take the camo jacket, and they distress the camo jacket that was, sitting on a rack in an army surplus store for $6. And suddenly it's on a rack in a specialty store for, $70. That same sort of feeling where you're like, but these are army issue. These are ubiquitous. They were in a drawer. How can you?
I feel like they could sell a lot more of these watches. I honestly feel like they could sell if they were just reasonably priced. So the standard, the one that I've always liked the look of is they do a Royal Navy quartz diver. So it's a simple quartz Royal Navy diver watch with a bezel on it, and they just happen to call it the Royal Navy diver. They have an automatic version of this watch, which the current price, well, I'll give you the price of it in 2012. So in 2012, and I'm going to have to do it in pounds, because that's how they're sold in pounds. I won't do the conversion. They sold this watch, this automatic Royal Navy Diver CWC watch, for £475 back in 2012. Inflation since then has been 14.3%. So adjusting for inflation, that would be about £542, which is, I think that's about right for a dateless ETA-powered mechanical
sort of
watch.
Basic mechanical, basic mechanical, nothing special. Not even Sapphire. I don't even know. But okay. And so you want me to guess? You want me to guess how much
in 8?
What it's going for now? 8 years now. Okay. So we originally picked it up 500, and obviously, inside knowledge, they turned up the price a bunch. Let's say an exorbitant, almost double. Let's say $900.
They've got a couple of different versions. They've got one that they're calling the 1980, but basically they're just different dials, same watch. But this one now is, $900. It's $900, or this Royal Navy one with just a different dial is nearly $2,000. £2,000 for this 1980 Royal Navy diver, and all they've done is change the dial and polish the case. Even if you go for the cheapest version of their mechanical dive watch, that's £900. So we're talking like $1,300 here. So,
wow.
I mean, you've gone in the space of 8 years from £475 to, at the cheapest, £900. So it's like you said, it's nearly double the price in 8 years for a watch that it has not changed it's not changed since it was issued to the Royal Navy throughout the 2000s. I can't think, even Rolex hasn't doubled their prices in 8 years.
Right? Yeah, I know, right?
It's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. And then you've got their standard G10 watch, which has slowly been creeping up. So this is the very simple, it's known as the G10. That's more of a nickname for it, because the G10 was the name of the form that the soldiers filled out. The G10 watch that they sold, which is the one that I've got, that I bought for £40, so about $55 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Back in 2012, they were selling this watch for £115. Then in 2016, that had gone from £115 to being £160 for this watch. Now, so in 2016, 160, just in an extra 4 years, that watch, the cheapest version of that watch that they sell is £200. So you've gone up, from 160 to 200 in the space of 4 years, or in the space of 8 years, you've gone from £115 up to £200. And that's the cheapest version. They actually sell that same watch. If you dare to want this with a date, right, it's like £300. Or if you want it with a slightly different dial, they've got one that's got a Desert Storm dial, £350. It's ridiculous.
These are quartz. These are quartz G10 basic, literally standard issue. Like the term standard issue comes from the fact that these were standard issue.
Yeah, standard issue. In fact, the one that I had was issued.
I can't think of what, because okay, if you said to me, all right, well, Chris, ETA is tightening up their movements, and they can't get a hold of the ETA movements anymore. Okay, all right, okay, fine. But why did you double the price of the quartz?
Yeah.
Okay, if that was the case, manufacturing hasn't, if anything, it's gotten cheaper. Like the ability to make these, we have robots now, future. So I can't really believe that there's something in their supply chain. This is not a complicated watch. This is a standard issue watch. So yeah, I would not, other than what we were talking about, which is sort of taking advantage of your nostalgic childhood, or the nostalgia and the memories and the brand built up around these watches.
The one that I've got is just for anybody that's looking, both the one that I'm comparing this to, the one that I've got has got the tritium dial. So the tritium dial ones are more expensive even on their website, but I was kind of giving you the idea of the cheapest one is $199. The tritium one is $349. And even on their website, they actually have a little bit of history about the Cabot Watch Company, where they say that they supplied the G10 watch from 1980. And it's estimated that over 200,000 of the G10 watches have been produced. So it just shows you how, when they were supplying them to the MOD, they were probably selling them to the MOD at, I'm guessing, less than £50. I mean, the MOD is
it has to
not
be
going to
half the price, right? Because it's a military watch. They're just going to set the price, and they're like, well, if you can make them for this price and make a little profit, fantastic. We want all of them. Military contract. Especially with this stuff. I mean, it's not, it's These are military, like you said, going back to the 80s. This is military contract stuff. So
I was just going to say their pricing really doesn't make a lot of sense. They have the standard watch that they sell. So, for example, this SBS, the Diver standard issue quartz version, which SBS, if anyone's not familiar with that term, that's the special boat service. They're like, I imagine that Delta Force would be over in the US or something. So we have this special air service, a special boat service. Anyway, there's a completely PVD blacked out quartz watch. They sell that quartz version for £699, so that's probably closer to $800. But if you want the version that is the 1987, again, quartz version, now as far as I can tell, all that they've done is change the bezel ring and then they photina'd the hands. And it's got, I think they've used... it's certainly got the T on the dial, so I wonder whether that's a throwback or whether they have actually used tritium. But either way, so if you want the special edition SBS one, it's not £699, it's £899 for a different dial and different hands. It's exploitative. I think. I feel like exploitative. Exactly. Yeah, taking advantage of the rest of that. That market. Yeah. No more special editions, Sam. We're done. Yeah.
No more reviewing special editions. We're going to talk about them.
I know. And just to reiterate, if anybody's listened to this to the end of the rant, is I would own every single one of these CWC watches. I love the history. I know service members in the UK who had these watches. They thought very fondly of them. A lot of people comment on that CWC video I did. I need to update it about fond memories they had with this watch. They're great. I mean, that quartz diver that they had could be probably one of the best watches you could own. It's highly, highly legible. They're fixed spring bars. They're a beautiful looking watch.
You make a great point. The fact that we're in this hobby and that we enjoy the watches, there has to be something else with the brand, with the story, where, when you put it on your wrist, okay, this was special. It's a tool watch. It's designed as a GMT, whatever. And it was, $2,000, but I feel like it's good value for the money. And the brand is well respected. You're looking for all of that. So when you look at this and say, well, here's a brand that's clearly, doubled their prices in a short number of years. They're owned by another company. They're clearly taking advantage of that connection to the military issued watches of everyone's childhood, and they're just jacking up the prices. So now you're like, I don't want that on my wrist. I don't want to represent that. And so I think it really drives home that there is that connection that people have to have with, like, when we discover new brands and we say, like, what do you guys, oh yeah, we're pumping these out and, whatever, mineral crystals cheaper, blah, blah, blah. You're like, all right, well, if that's what you want, but that's not what we want. We want the value. We want the story. This is all part of this. This is all part of the hobby and discovering these brands. And so, yeah, this exploitive nature of these brands, so hard to.
What I would say, if you are going to spend money on a CWC watch and you like the brand and you like the ethos and you're comfortable with spending that amount of money on the watch, I would do some research on military forums or something like that and see if you can find either a service member that still has their watch, although I imagine they might have had to hand them back, or find one that's been issued. And now I know it's hard to work out whether they've been issued or not, but at least I'm sure you could find one that is about the right time frame, sort of, if you're thinking like Bosnian War, like Falklands in the 80s, if you're looking up the dates, and maybe if you like the romance of it, at least find one that was produced at that time, which probably means that likely maybe a military service member had it. Maybe you can find somebody, just do a little bit of research. Because these brand new ones they're homage. They're obviously they're made the same way, and that it's technically the same company, even though it's in different hands that are making it, but they're not currently in military issues. And I imagine it's maybe because of the pricing. I mean, they went with Pulsar watches, didn't they, and like Seiko's for a while.
Yeah. And I would say, as someone I own a couple of that vintage, that like early 90s era, or late 90s era watch. They made them to survive. Where I would maybe not delve into something from the 60s, 50s, and 60s, I don't think that I would be comfortable looking at or purchasing a vintage Omega from the 50s and 60s. I think I'd be completely out of my comfort zone. I think it's much more likely that you could get a decent example, mid 90s watch that was maybe issued, that you could have a watchmaker check out, that could be made absolutely waterproof, tough as nails, have no problem with it. That's much more likely. And I'd almost say that feels, for me, if I was on the hunt for one of these, that would be more rewarding than just handing over the $1,900 for the special edition.
And what I'd say, if you're listening to this podcast and you're kind of shouting at your iPhone or something and saying, well, what they don't appreciate is that this is a small watch company now making these watches, that argument doesn't sit well with me, because you only have to look at other companies like Time Factors, which is run by one guy out of his house, and he's recreating or keeping alive vintage military brands, like Persista and a few other of those brands. Dave, who runs Detroit Mint on our regular on our forum, who's knocking out watches the $200 mark that are homages to 60, the 6105s. These watches they're being produced, I'm convinced, for a fraction of what they're costing him. And to be honest, if this $200 watch that they're selling, this G10, if they can't make this £200 watch, or if they can't make this £199 watch for less than, say, £100, their supply chain is totally messed up. Like, they're doing it wrong. Yeah, so that was my... Chris had his little rant about knives, and that was my little rant about CWC. I think that ultimately, especially if there's some kind of economic retraction, I feel like this could kill the CWC brand, because I think if you're seriously looking at it, it's what price do you put on the history of this watch? Like, for a quartz watch, what history, when you could probably, with a little bit of work, I mean, so I had a look today, just anecdotally, those Pulsar watches that I imagine probably cost £20 to make, they're on eBay for like £150, but they were issued, they were military issued. If you like the idea of military issued watches, you could probably, with a little bit of research, maybe find one that even on active duty with somebody, or
maybe half the price.
Yeah, or to Chris's point, who's our kind of channel's resident military expert, is you would probably be surprised at the watches that real service members used and why they used them. And some of them, certainly in Chris's case, he wore a Citizen for a long time. To hear those stories about the military watches that were common, I mean, I imagine that more of the British soldiers might be wearing G-Shocks now than wore CWC watches at the time. I mean, that's just probably a conjecture on my part again. I'm really interested to know what you think about CWC, and certainly Chris is interested to know about what you think about if you're into knives and that EDC community. Let us know over on the Facebook group. I'm not expecting you to agree with me on the CWC thing, but I know it was certainly a point that came up on the Facebook group this week. Chris, thanks for joining me again.
Thanks, Sam.
As always, guys, thank you so much for listening, and we'll both see you next time on Casual Watch Talk. Thanks, guys. Bye.